Imagine a single decision, a trembling finger hovering over a launch button, and the world as we know it turned to ash. During the Cold War, that moment almost came, more than once. These weren't movie scripts. These were real people, real weapons, and real close calls. And we are about to dive into the moments that brought humanity to the absolute brink of extinction. After the devastation of World War II, the world yearned for peace, a new era, free from the horrors of global conflict. But that peace never fully arrived. Instead, the post-war world was quickly divided along ideological lines, descending into a new kind of struggle. On one side stood the United States and its Western allies, advocating for capitalism, liberal democracy, and open markets. On the other, the Soviet Union emerged as the leader of a communist bloc, uniting several nations under a vision of state-controlled economies and authoritarian governance. This division was not just geopolitical, it was deeply psychological. Suspicion ran high, alliances were forged in fear, and trust between East and West evaporated. What followed was not a traditional war fought with armies on open battlefields, but a cold, calculated conflict waged through espionage, propaganda, proxy wars, and an ever-growing stockpile of nuclear weapons. It was a war of ideology, influence, and intimidation, a dangerous game of brinkmanship that kept the entire planet under the shadow of annihilation for over 4 decades. With this division came a surging arms race. Each side poured vast resources into building nuclear arsenals. Not hundreds of bombs, but tens of thousands. Hydrogen bombs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched warheads, weapons engineered not just to defeat an enemy, but to end all life on Earth. It was a doctrine chilling in its simplicity, mutually assured destruction. If one side fired, both would perish. The very existence of these arsenals became the balancing act, a grim equilibrium of terror. This balance almost shattered in October of 1962, during what the world would remember as the Cuban Missile Crisis. The United States had discovered the unthinkable. The Soviet Union was deploying nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. There was no time to waste. President John F. Kennedy addressed the nation, announcing a quarantine of the island. Across the sea, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev faced a dilemma: withdraw and appear weak, or push forward, risking annihilation. Tension crackled across the globe. In the Atlantic, Soviet ships bearing missiles pressed onward, drawing ever closer to the U.S. blockade. American bombers circled, ready to strike at a moment's notice. In secret meetings, exhausted officials debated, haunted by the knowledge that any miscalculation could mean the end. The world collectively held its breath. For 13 days, it seemed the clock was one step from midnight. But humanity survived, this time by the narrowest margins. A back-channel deal was struck. Khrushchev would remove the missiles from Cuba if the U.S. secretly agreed to pull its own nuclear weapons from Turkey. The world exhaled. For now. The lesson? The fate of civilization could hinge on fragile deals made behind closed doors, on humans willing to risk everything for peace. Still, the world failed to learn one terrifying lesson. Humanity had no real defense against its own nuclear weapons. But the Cuban Missile Crisis was not the last close call. Far from it. The world came close to nuclear war more times than most realize. often stopped only by the courage, skepticism, or even exhaustion of individual men and women. On September 26, 1983, the world stood on the edge yet again. Deep inside a Soviet command bunker, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov faced a flashing alarm. Satellite systems had detected the launch of 5 American missiles. Doctrine dictated only one response: immediate counterstrike. Launch everything. Petrov had minutes to decide. Adrenaline coursed through him. Instead of following protocol, however, Petrov did something extraordinary. He hesitated. He reasoned that a real American first strike would involve more than just 5 missiles. It must be a computer error. He chose not to report the warning up the chain of command, holding off Soviet retaliation. And he was right. It was a malfunction. A decision made alone, under unimaginable pressure, saved perhaps billions of lives. 12 years later, in 1995, danger returned in a different form. From a Norwegian research station, scientists launched a Black Brant missile to study the Northern Lights, but the Russian military wasn't notified. Alarms blared in Moscow. On President Boris Yeltsin's desk, the nuclear suitcase, the Cheget, came to life. For the first time, the Russian nuclear system was armed and ready. Yeltsin waited as tense officials tracked the missile's path. Only moments before impact, they determined it was not a threat. Once again, disaster was averted not by technology, but by a leader's human judgment, patience, and restraint. Yet, with every close call, arsenals just kept growing. By the 1980s, over 60,000 nuclear warheads filled silos, submarines, and bombers across the globe. Engineers devised macabre insurance plans against surprise attacks, including the deadly Dead Hand, a Soviet system designed to automatically launch missiles if leadership was wiped out. Even if no one was left alive, the machines would finish the job. Supposedly foolproof methods to guarantee retaliation made accidental war more likely. The logic of overkill reigned, creating weapons so powerful, so automated, that they threatened to escape all human control. The Cold War officially ended in 1991, with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The world breathed easier, and hope flickered. Yet the missiles remain. America and Russia still possess over 90% of the world's nuclear arsenal. And new powers entered the scene: China, India, Pakistan, North Korea, each adding their own weapons to the global stockpile. Meanwhile, advances in artificial intelligence and digital command systems have introduced unpredictability in ways even Cold War architects could not imagine. Today, the threat has evolved. It is as much software glitch as it is political posturing. One rogue leader, one hack, one misunderstood test, one bad line of code, that's all it takes. The risk persists, stalking humanity like a shadow. The Cold War taught us a chilling truth. The greatest threat to humanity may be humanity itself. Our intellect built civilization and gave us the power to destroy it in a heartbeat. But through all the tension, all the madness, a strange flicker of hope remained. Even in a world bristling with doomsday weapons, the fate of billions sometimes came down to one person choosing reason over fear, choosing life over blind obedience. So remember their names: Petrov, Yeltsin, and countless others who quietly kept us from the abyss. Remember how close we have come, and ask, how close are we now? History shapes us, but it is our choices, today and tomorrow, that will decide our fate. Thank you for journeying through this sobering chapter of human history. If you found these stories thought-provoking, continue seeking out the lessons of our past, for only by understanding how close we have come can we work together to ensure it never happens again. Stay curious, stay questioning. The future depends on it.